The Lord of the Rings Online is an epic game that spans from the Shire to Mordor and beyond. But in its inception, when it went from the Shire to Angmar, the top level was 50. Since then, The Lord of the Rings Online has had numerous expansions that have boosted that level limit up to 140, with another expansion coming later this year that will presumably boost the level again. But this has many players asking the question, should we be cutting that level cap down so that new players can have an easier experience coming in? Today, we're going to answer that very question. What is happening, everybody? My name is BrightLife. This is my fancy shirt. We've also got a vest on today because we're feeling extra fancy for you. And today, we're going to be talking about the level squish in Lord of the Rings Online. In a recent Court of the Rings live stream between Cordovan and Severlin, the two big producer names in this game, they chatted briefly about the idea of squishing the levels down for this game. And so today we're going to be walking through what a level squish in Lord of the Rings Online would be, some of the pros and cons of it, and then I'll give you my take here at the end. But friends, before we jump into the video, please do hit that like button. Even if you disagree with something that I say, hit the like button. It helps me be seen by more Lord of the Rings Online lovers. And while you're there, go ahead and leave me a comment of whether you think a level squish should be a part of this game or not moving into the future. All right, let's jump into it. Now, really quickly, let's define a level squish. Essentially, a level squish is where you cut the levels of max level characters down from a higher number to a lower number. It's very simple. Oftentimes, this will come with either level and zone scaling or story cluster choice, kind of like in World of Warcraft. Beyond that, it's really up to the game developer to do it how they will. Now, of course, the most notable example of a level squish was when Shadowlands transitioned in World of Warcraft over to Dragonflight. The top level then went down from 120 plus down to 60. And of course, this had very positive effects for the World of Warcraft, but largely it happened and then it was done. Now, of course, there are pros and cons to this system, but in a recent poll that I put out on my channel, we had 226 votes on this question, should the Lord of the Rings Online have a level squish? 64% of people said yes, 19% of people said they didn't care, and then 17% of people said absolutely not. Now, notably, in my last video, the comments were pretty unanimous that level squishing should not be a thing. So it's very interesting how people vote. But first, let's talk about the 3 pros and the 3 cons of level squishing in Lord of the Rings Online. Now, the first pro, and one of the largest for the existing player base, is the removal of leveling inflation. And what I mean by that is leveling inflation is what it feels like when you go and get another level, but because there are just so many ahead of you, not 50, 60, 70, 80, there's 120, 130, 140 levels ahead of you. Each level doesn't feel very significant. I've found this to be the case for me as I've leveled through this game. Currently, my max level player is in the 90s, but I couldn't really tell you the exact level because every level kind of feels the same, to be honest with you, especially in that mid-game period. That period between levels 60, 65, all the way up to probably 120, 125, it kind of just all blends together. There's not really anything significant that comes from leveling up because there are so many levels ahead of you. And I think that this can lead for a lot of mid-game players into leveling burnout. This can definitely happen, where because even though you've played for hundreds and hundreds of hours, you still have hundreds and hundreds of hours to go before you can even experience the end game. And of course, this would be a pro of the level squish. If you were to take the levels from a top end of 140 down to maybe 70, each level would feel more significant. Each level would feel like you're accomplishing something more, especially if those levels take a little bit longer to get because the journey would likely stay the same. So that's pro number 1 for the level squish. Now let's talk about the first con for the level squish, which is that it makes the journey of LOTRO feel diminished. And this is a very valid point. The reality is Lord of the Rings Online, as I talk to people online when I make videos and they ask if they should play this game, I tell them that this game really is about the journey. The journey from the Shire to Mordor and beyond is epic. It's fascinating and it has great story all the way through. There are so many incredible sights to see in this game. There are so many fun monsters to fight and honestly great friends to be made in this wonderful community. And if you were to cut down the levels, it seems like maybe you would diminish some of that journey. Other MMOs have such this rush to get to endgame because that's really where they sink their teeth into you, especially in your wallet. But Lord of the Rings Online breaks from that mold in that the journey feels like the entire game. In fact, endgame is kind of not absent, but it's just not as developed as other MMOs endgames are, and that's largely because the developers have taken the time to flesh out this journey and make it feel significant. And so, of course, with a level squish, this might feel like that journey has been diminished, which would be a huge bummer, of course. Now let's talk about pro number 2. Level squishes make the game much more accessible to a new player. When a new player comes to the Lord of the Rings Online, or really any MMO, one of the first things that they will do is they'll look up what is the max level. Once you walk into one of the capital cities, say Bree in Lord of the Rings Online, you start to see people up in level 90s, 100s, 110. They all have really cool looking armor and stuff, but you start to wonder, what is the max level in this game? And where a lot of other games have their max levels sitting currently with World of Warcraft at 60, Final Fantasy XIV at 80, when you see Lord of the Rings Online come in at 140, it can just seem like there's such a long journey ahead. And while the journey is great, the journey can sometimes seem very insurmountable, especially for the more casual player that likes Lord of the Rings, but really needs an MMO that's going to respect their time. I think that this especially comes into play once you start leveling to level 20, 25, and 30. You realize that these are not short levels. These are not like rapid fire Korean MMO levels. These are long, arduous journey levels. And so for a lot of newer players, when they come to the Lord of the Rings Online, the journey is enticing, but there's almost too much of it for them. In fact, I know this from personal experience. In my Discord, we have a number of people that, they like the videos that we make about other games, and they'll talk about Lord of the Rings Online and say, listen, it seems like a great game, but if they fix the lag and then maybe if the level cap wasn't so high, then I would jump into the game. And I think that this is really significant because an MMO is only as good as two things: how it can retain players and how it can draw in new players. That's what really makes the game great. And Lord of the Rings Online definitely has an issue with this when it comes to its level cap being so high. Again, for some new players, this isn't going to be the case. They're going to love the high-end level cap and they're okay with it. But for a majority of the players who are used to how MMOs are, 140, especially once they start leveling through and seeing how long these levels take, it can definitely feel like a really long and insurmountable journey, especially for the normal MMO crowd of, the dad who gets home, puts his kids to bed, and then has a couple hours to play. And of course, a level squish would really help that. Even if the journey was the same amount, or maybe just slightly shortened, if there were 70 levels to go instead of 140, that would certainly make the game more accessible to a new player. Now let's go to con number 2 for the level squish, which is, of course, lots of development resources and energy would have to be committed to fine-tuning a level squish. When it comes to a level squish, I think it would be naive to say that you would just take every number under a character or enemy portrait and just cut it in half. There would be lots of balancing that would have to go into that. In fact, you'd have to really ask the question, so what level are you when you get to Moria? Are you cut in half, so are you level 25? Or, do you shorten those levels a little bit and make it 22, 21? You have to make the game's journey still feel significant, and so that would take development resources and energy. And of course, when it comes to Lord of the Rings Online, we're not talking about Blizzard or Square Enix here. We're talking about a smaller, more dedicated boutique team, a team that is very good at what they do, and of course, they continue to develop a great game, but you have to wonder, do they have the resources and energy to put into doing this well? As I mentioned at the beginning, the most notable big level squish that's happened in the last couple of years came from World of Warcraft, which they make it seem pretty easy, but the reality is hundreds of man hours go into trying to figure this all out. And the question is, do you want the development team focusing in on a level squish, or do you want them focusing on other things like lag fixes, making the game even more robust, working on new stories, things like that? And so a level squish would certainly take away from those just by nature of how time budgets look in a company. All right, and pro number 3 for a level squish is the game would feel more rewarding when you level up when it comes to a level squish. I mentioned this in the beginning, but this has kind of come to me through playing classic World of Warcraft, especially in that hardcore mode that they have going on over there right now. The levels that you gain in classic World of Warcraft, with the cap being 60 and levels really taking quite a long time to get, it feels very rewarding. Every single level that you level up feels extraordinarily significant, where I couldn't tell you really the level of my main character in Lord of the Rings Online because I just know that it's somewhere in the 90s. I can tell you that my main character that I got furthest in hardcore was level 23. Like, I know exactly where I was in the World of Warcraft in that side of things because it was just a more rewarding journey when I leveled up. I think that if Standing Stone were to commit to a level squish and they were to make each level significant for the classes, where every level or two you get a new skill or ability, a thing that makes your class feel a little bit more alive and robust, I think that the leveling experience would feel much more rewarding. Nowadays, the only thing that you really get at a level up typically is an extra attribute point to put into your trait tree. And that's fine, but other games reward you so much more for leveling up. And the fact that we have such a level inflation, it makes it hard for each level to feel rewarding. And so a pro of the level squish would be that it would bring back the rewarding feeling of leveling up, especially through that mid game. The third con of the level squish is kind of on the same coin, is that levels would feel a lot slower, and they're already slow because the journey is so long in this game. And so where on the one hand it would be a lot more rewarding, on the other hand it would be a lot more slow. And so you really have to balance those two things out. Some people really do want extremely fast leveling. They want to feel like they're accomplishing something every time they jump on the game with a new level and new level. You wouldn't feel that if there was a level squish, because I think the journey would have to stay just as long, and I think that that would be an issue for a lot of people. And as I was recording this, I did think of just one more pro for the level squish, which kind of shows you which way I'm leaning. I apologize. But the last pro that I would say just spontaneously is this really would fix the mid-game grouping experience. If you've gotten into levels 70, 80, and 90, you'll know that there really isn't any dungeoning for the mid-game. There just aren't. And I think that Lord of the Rings group instances, when you play through them, are actually really engaging and fun. There are a lot of great mechanics that exist, but because there's such a gulf between levels, 10 and 20 where a lot of players are, and then 140 where a lot of players are, there's this weird gap that exists of like 100 plus levels where people are just spread out all over the place. If you were to squish that down, I think that the mid game would allow you to play more of the group instanced content that's out there. And so I just thought of that one right at the end, but I think that would really help with the level squish as well. Okay, so let's talk my take. And before I do that, I want to remind you, put your take, now that you've heard the pros and cons, in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? But here's my take. I think that there is a middle point here, and I've kind of alluded to it, but it's this. I think that there should be a level squish, but not a journey squish. I think that to take the journey that Lord of the Rings Online is, and to squish it down for the sake of numbers, and to leave out expansions or leave out areas that you can level through, would really make the game feel less fun. But I think that if you level squish, it would allow more players to live closer together, allowing them to experience that group content, allowing new players to come in and, yes, experience the slow journey, but also experience the rewarding journey that Lord of the Rings Online is. I think that the fact that there are so many levels, regardless of what you or I think as veteran players, for a newer player who we need to come into this game and to try this thing out, 140 just feels like too long of a journey for most of them. And I think that we need to remove that barrier. In fact, if you were to say that there's one objective that I think LOTRO needs to focus on, it is really getting new players to play this game. And I think a level squish is one of the best ways that they could do that. And again, really my primary reasoning is it's because of the experience of the prospective player. I think as a veteran, I want more players in this game, not just more, dedicated players' hours. I think that we're already going to give it to this game. We love this world. The developers have done such a great job. We need those prospective players to come in. And I think that number of 140 or even up to 150 at the end of this year just feels way too long for them. And to be honest with you, if you look at Steam charts, which I know doesn't really show accurate numbers, but it does typically show accurate trends, we can see that LOTRO has been at a steady decline over the last few months in population. I just think that there's so much competition out there, and LOTRO's level cap number does tend to shoot itself in the foot. So I think that a level squish would be the jolt that would bring a lot of players either back to the game or have a lot of players come and take the jump into the game. So yes, I know it would cost man hours, but I think that you could squish the levels without squishing the journey. But hey, that's just my opinion, and I'd really actually love to hear yours. What do you think? Do you think that we should have a level squish, not have a level squish, or do you just not really care? Let me know in the comments below. Friends, as always, I just want to say thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of this video. It is wonderful to have you with us. If you liked the video, again, hit the like button. If you loved it, hit the subscribe button. It really does help the channel out a lot. But friends, the last two things that I say at the end of every one of my videos is the most important thing that we could say in any video ever, and it's this. It's that you're more loved than you know, and you are so much more valuable than you realize. I hope you have an incredible day, and I will see you in the next one.